Trump trial continues day 7. We've got new witnesses as the plaintiff's case, E. Jean Carroll's, comes to a close. There was some new updates related to the billionaire Reid Hoffman, who has a curious relationship with somebody we know well here on this channel called Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is allegedly dead. Now, we saw that Donald Trump was also visiting Scotland, and he had a statement saying that he might be making his way back to the United States to appear at this trial. We'll see if that happens or not. We've got Carroll Martin, we've got Ashley Humphreys as new witnesses, and we've got their histories here. Some of them don't like Donald Trump too much, so we'll investigate that. Of course, as usual, we'll check back in with Inner City Press, who is there on scene in the Southern District of New York. Matthew Russell Lee reporting at innercitypress.com. And so let's get started with the most recent interesting little development, which is the billionaire backer who is supporting the Trump litigation. This guy, Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, worth billions of dollars, has been financing this lawsuit. Now, we were asking ourselves, where was all this money coming from that would be able to fund many lawyers and many expert witnesses for a long period of time just to continue to be a thorn in Trump's side? How did this all happen? And we learned that it was Reid Hoffman. We found that out in a letter that Alina Abba received from Roberta Kaplan, saying that no, this is not being funded by the law firm. No, there's a billionaire backer who is the person behind the whole thing. And the Wall Street Journal has had several different stories. They got their hands on a trove of documents from Epstein and his calendar and his schedules, and they are telling us that he had a visit with Reid Hoffman some time ago. I clipped a couple things from the story, and we now know that when venture capitalist Reid Hoffman had a flight scheduled to land in New York, Epstein arranged for Hoffman to stay overnight in his townhouse. And we have a full video coming out on this, but Epstein had a lot of questionable things at that Manhattan townhouse. We covered the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, and we saw many of those exhibits couldn't even be submitted as exhibits in court. Hoffman was scheduled to attend a breakfast party with Epstein. Hoffman told the Journal he only once visited the island residence. I was only there once. For an MIT fundraising trip. With Mr. Ito. He said he regrets the meeting with Epstein. His last interaction with Epstein was in 2015. Now, this is curious, because a lot of these people are very hysterical when it comes to, women being abused, especially like E. Jean Carroll. Yeah, I can't believe that Donald Trump, the monster, did what he did to her. Can you believe that? No, I can't. So I care about women. I care about victims of abuse, right? Says Hoffman. That's why he's funding all of this. Well, then why was he hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein in 2015? A notorious and convicted trafficker of minors. If somebody is so interested in bringing Trump to justice to stop his rampant abuse from all over the years, why is he hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein? What? If he's so concerned about women being abused. Isn't that curious? That's really weird to me. I'm not sure. So you see here's a photograph, billionaire Reid Hoffman hanging with Lawrence Summers, former Treasury, and Miss Summers' wife, Harvard professor. And I've always said Harvard is disgusting. This is just more evidence of it. They are flying around. The documents reveal that Epstein had plans for Hoffman to visit his private island. That happened back in March of 2014 and November 2014. He was going to travel with them over from Palm Beach. Hoffman said he was there just meeting with him to generate funds. And all of it happened in 2014 after Epstein was already convicted. So if they're so concerned, if they're so worried about E. Jean Carroll and women being abused, why were they hanging out with Epstein all those years, going to his townhouse and all the things? It's very curious. Now, wouldn't it be nice if this judge allowed us to talk about that stuff so that we could say maybe this whole case is biased? Maybe it's not having anything to do with getting a remedy for E. Jean Carroll. Maybe it has everything to do with people like Reid Hoffman being plugged in with major political players trying to exploit a woman named E. Jean Carroll, who may or may, we don't really know what her deal is. She's a very interesting person, but she is a very useful plaintiff, and they just latched onto her and decided that she would be a useful way to go and attack Donald Trump. Reid Hoffman funded the litigation in cahoots with George Conway, who referred E. Jean Carroll to Roberta Kaplan, her lawyer. So they were just assembling a team. And now we know Reid Hoffman doesn't really, in my opinion, doesn't really have a lot of concern about abusers, right? He might be concerned about Trump, but not about the abuse part of Trump, because he hung out with a convicted abuser named Jeffrey Epstein and was going to stay at his Manhattan house. So that seems like it might be relevant to the jury to know that this might actually be a politically funded operation. But is the judge going to allow that in? No, of course not. Why? Because this judge has not been fair. Trump is calling that out. Speaking from Scotland, Donald Trump says he might make his way back to America to come here and attend this trial so he can respond to E. Jean Carroll himself.
I have to leave Ireland and I have to leave Scotland, where I have great properties. I have to leave early. I don't have to, but I choose to.
Will you attend the trial, Mr. President?
I'll probably attend. It's a disgrace that it's allowed to happen. It's called false accusations against a rich guy, or in my case, against a famous, rich, and political person that's leading the polls by 40 points. And I have to go back for a woman that made a false accusation about me, and I have a judge who's extremely hostile. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to confront this one. This woman is a disgrace, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen in our country. That's totally false. It was fake. She's a fake. She wrote in a book she's a Democrat. We have a rough judge. We have a judge that doesn't like me much, appointed by Bill Clinton. And he's a guy that doesn't like me much. He's, I guess, not allowing the coat that they wanted to put into evidence. Once we said, yes, put it into evidence, they said, oh, we don't want to do that. It's a disgrace, but I have to do it. That's part of life.
Part of life, says Trump. And so we are going to jump into the trial testimony. Our first witness is going to be Carroll Martin, who is a friend of E. Jean Carroll, who allegedly received a call. E. Jean Carroll confided in her at some point after the alleged incident. And so, as usual, let's turn our attention over to Matthew Russell Lee. Trump trial resumes day 7. Jury enters the room. We're following courtesy of Inner City Press on Twitter. The judge says, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we left off yesterday while playing Trump's deposition. He says, we're going to just pick up with that right now. And they start playing. Question to Trump during a deposition. Trump, who is in this photo? He says, that's John Johnson. I thought he was good at what he did. Seemed like a nice guy. I don't know. You said, Trump, that you said that Carroll was trying to sell a book. He says, right. Do you know anything about the financial arrangement between Carroll and her publisher? Trump says, I have no idea. Did anyone in your team do research into Miss Carroll? Not that I know. It's possible. The deposition is still playing. They fast forward. Trump says, you know, Carroll, I think she's sick, mentally sick. Didn't she say it was sexy to be attacked? Didn't she tell Anderson Cooper that? By the way, that is not sexy. That's not sexy at all. And you know, Trump is right about that. She did say that to Anderson Cooper. We do have the clip. And since it came up in the trial, why don't we just take a quick listen to it? Because it is, in fact, right here. This is what she said to Anderson.
You don't feel like a victim?
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished.
No.
Which, the word rape carries so many sexual connotations. This was not sexual. It hurt. You know.
Well, I think most people think of rape as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
Yeah, we are. We're wondering about yours.
We're going to take a quick break.
We're wondering about yours. We're wondering why you might come up with your own sexy fantasies.
If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Even Anderson's like, this lady's nuts. She's nuts, man. I don't even know. He's like, we're going to cut to commercial. This is just crazy. So that is what Trump was referencing in the trial. The judge says, hey, pause it, everybody. Stop for a minute. We got to back up. We have an audio visual problem. They got their own tubes problems over there. Tell me about it. I can relate. So now the problem's fixed. They hit the thing on the side. It reboots. Video starts playing again. Trump says to Roberta Kaplan, this is the lawyer for Carroll. He says, Roberta, he says, you're a political operative too, You're a disgrace. He calls it to her face in the middle of the depot. Trump is sitting there getting questions from Roberta. Hey, yeah, no, I know you got a lot of questions for me. By the way, you're a political operative too. You know that, Roberta? You're a disgrace also. She says, she keeps her composure. Says, you called it a hoax. I take it you're saying Miss Carroll fabricated. Question is, Trump, you use hoax a lot. You say that a lot. Can you give us some examples, Trump? He says, yeah, sure. Ukraine, hoax. Lying to the FISA court, hoax. Lying to Congress, hoax. Lying by this scum we have in this country. They spied on my campaign. I could get a whole list of them. He says, this thing's a hoax too. He's right about all of them. Yeah, Ukraine, lying to FISA, lying to Congress, lying to by this scum we have all over this country. They spied on my campaign. And I get a whole list of them. You want a list of them? I'll give them to you, Roberta. Did you also refer to the use of mail-in ballots as a hoax? He says, yeah, I do. Not anymore, I don't think he does. Now I think he thinks that they're very useful now. But remember, this deposition is from some time ago. So he said, don't use them. Now I think he's on the mail-in ballot train now. And that's just appropriate. Did you refer to mail-in ballots as a hoax? Yeah. Do you vote by mail? He says, yeah, I do. But I have no idea what happened to it afterwards. I sent it in there, it went somewhere. Now they play in the depot, they play the Access Hollywood tape for Trump. Now in the video, it says, now she's got the big phony tease. When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. You just grab them by the purses. Always good. You don't fall out of the bus. Remember Gerald Ford, Billy Bush? They play the video. They say, hey, Trump, you said you can grab him by the purse? He says, well, historically, it's been true. If you look back, look at the stars. Are you familiar with Natasha Stoynoff, Trump? No. She wrote about you at People magazine. Oh, yeah. She said I was aggressive. Yeah, she wrote a nice story about me and then came up with this phony charge. He says, all right, let me show you a video. In the video, Trump says, the story about Melania and I, our first anniversary, now 12 years later, she says I made inappropriate advances. Wasn't that part of the story? The depot continues. Roberta Kaplan asks Trump, what do you mean by, quote, would not be my first choice? Trump says to Roberta, well, you wouldn't be my first choice either there, Roberta. I hope you're not insulted. That's what I meant by it. I sort of meant, well, let me give you an example. You also would not be my first choice. Hope you're not insulted. And speaking of that, there is an interesting clip here from Trump. I think we played this yesterday. Do we have it? All right. Well, I thought we had it. I don't know where it is. We'll continue. Now, the depot is over. So they go back to questions. Judge Kaplan says, okay, next witness. Plaintiff's attorney comes in and says, Your Honor, we call Frances Carroll Martin. And Frances Carroll Martin is this woman here on day 7. Used to be a journalist. I'm not sure what her current status is, but she's a friend of E. Jean Carroll, and allegedly she got the phone call. Carroll was confiding in her after the incident occurred. Says, Miss Martin, can you tell us your full name? She says, yeah, my name is Frances Carroll Martin. And how long have you known Miss Carroll? Oh, gosh, 30 years. When did America's Talking broadcast? She said, what are you doing? I'm a journalist. And were you on TV? Yeah. What show were you on? I was on America's Talking broadcast. Okay. And when did that air? Oh, she says that came from July 4th, 1994 to July 4th, 1996. Did that one out of Fort Lee, New Jersey. And that's where you worked then? She says, yeah. Was Roger Ailes involved in this? She says, yes. What'd you do next? Well, after that show, I went and I did the People's Court. I did that with Ed Koch. And you did a bunch of work. And did you do anything with E. Jean Carroll at that time? She says, yeah, what I call aging woman things. Lots of lunches, comedy clubs, things we like to do. Miss Martin, did Miss Carroll tell you about Bergdorf Goodman, this store that you were in? She says, yeah. We went from the studio to my house. And she told me. Counsel says, did you think She says, I think something, and I'm not exactly sure what. Well, what did Miss Carroll say to you? She came and she told me Trump attacked me. Did you know who she meant? She said, yeah, there's only one Donald Trump that I knew, the only one that's part of the landscape. Ms. Martin, when E. Jean called you, was she crying? No, but she was upset. She seemed a little bit frenzied. Did you touch E. Jean? We hugged. It was disconcerting when we hugged. Did E. Jean tell you what she planned to do? Miss Martin says, she said she'd called Lisa Birnbaum, who we heard from earlier in the trial, and said, go to the police. But I told her, I said, hold on a minute. Donald Trump has a lot of attorneys and he would bury you. And then when she told me she was dedicating the book to me and Lisa for keeping the covenant, she said, and Tacopina chimes in, he says, Your Honor, I have to object. The judge, of course, overrules it. No, what are you, nuts? Overruled. So Roberta Kaplan, E. Jean's lawyer, continues. It said, Does Miss Carroll give you a draft? Yeah, she did. It was at that dinner at an Upper West Side. Also with Lisa was there, and her husband came along, Michael. And E. Jean brought 11 pages of a draft and shared it with us. Oh, that's nice. Did you discuss it? No, I didn't read it right away. Because we're at dinner, you know, I didn't read it right there in front of everybody. Did you plan to come forward? No. It was 2019. I was worried about the climate of the country, security, and so were members of my family. But then you later agreed to be identified? She said yes. On the New York Times, The Daily Podcast. So she's scared for all of these years, freaked out, and then shows up on the New York Times podcast. Got it. Are you still concerned about security? Yeah. Do you like Donald Trump? Not particularly. My worldview is very different, and some in his party. But are you testifying here, Miss Martin, because of your political views? No. Did you have to give a deposition in this case? Yes. Is this your email? The judge chimes in and says, you may want to change it, which is a weird thing. This judge is being very strange. Inner City Press notes, so far, virtually none of the exhibits shown to the jury are available to the public. So the judge is like, well, everybody's going to see your email now. And Inner City's like, nobody sees it. We can't see anything right now. So the judge is just continuing to interject in this trial. And it's so strange. And it's almost vouching. He's validating her concerns. And he does it to support the plaintiff's case. Right now, we have E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, examining Miss Martin. She's concerned about attacks, my family, security. And now, as part of this trial, they got to put her email up on the screen. And the judge says, you might want to change it in case you get attacked again. He's vouching, he's validating all of her concerns. These are subtle little subliminal things. But every one of these adds up to the jury. If throughout the 6-7 days of trial, the jury is watching the judge every day support the plaintiff and castigate the defense, it adds up. Especially if you don't notice these things. It's even body language, right? Think about how much communication is not actually communication. And think about this judge huffing and scoffing all the time for the defense. And then supporting the plaintiff like, oh, that's from a book, isn't it? Oh, brilliant. Love that. Great answer. The email, Inner City Press, has seen the address, is about Nambia. Martin says, I thought he should have known better. Lawyer says, now you said to Miss Carroll that when better, you and she should scheme. Scheme. Wow. What was that about? She says, well, there were health concerns. That's what we were talking about. Ms. Martin, why are you here today to testify? I'm here to recount what my friend told me in 1996. I believed it then and I believe it now. Tacopina objects. Your Honor, that's inappropriate. It should be stricken. The judge says, I agree. I'll strike it. And let's go on a break. Now, there were no further questions. And we come back. It says, I understand the media wants to access exhibits. The answer is no. Jury comes back in. Cross-examination is about to begin. Judge says, Mr. Tacopina, floor is yours. Ms. Martin, you have donated about, 10 times to liberals? Is that true? Yes, but they were small donations. And you turned over some of your texts and your emails in your discovery. Is that true? Yeah. All right, I want to discuss a few items with you. We'll just go one by one. The exhibits come out. They start looking at them. Tacopina says, I want to show you these exhibits. And the judge cuts him off. Says, hey, Joe, why don't you just ask if she has said these things? So the judge literally is interjecting again, right in his cross-examination, to stop him. You don't get to do it this way, do it my way, which is interfering in the middle of his performance. So he's got a whole plan, right? You've got a whole plan when you're going to come out there and go through your notes. Don't do it your way, do it my way. It's very jarring, very rattling. He's got to change his whole structure now. He says, I want to ask Miss Martin, did you say this man is spreading his stank all over the place? Did you say that? Spreading his stank? She says, yeah, that sounds like me. And here you're writing about Ivanka Trump at a G20 meeting, and you say, how can they sit there and quote Charles Blow's tweets? Did you say that? She says, yeah, that's how I felt. And you called them the two junior grifters. You said they're the two junior grifters. Who are they? I was referring to Ivanka and Jared. He says, Miss Martin, now what is a scheme? What is a scheme? Or what are we familiar with here? Are you familiar? She says, to put together a plan. Is it a secret? Not necessarily. This was right after the election of Trump. This was a typical conversation. Talking about scheming against Trump. Typical. Tacopina goes, okay, Miss Carroll. And again, this is confusing. A lot of these people have the same names. Roberta Kaplan is the lawyer. Judge Kaplan is the judge. We've got E. Jean Carroll. This is Carroll Martin. So Miss Martin, Miss Carroll said, I have something special for you. Do you know what that was? I think she was referring to the stuffed squirrel she gave as a gift. What did you think of that? She says, I don't know. Well, I want to go back to your deposition, and there's an objection from Roberta. It says, during this time that we're talking about, Miss Martin, you were married to somebody called Joseph Perry? Yeah. And no one else was in the house at the time? No, they were not. And Miss Carroll said that she felt physically okay when she came over. Is that right? She says, maybe in so many words. I don't know. He says, well, reading from the deposition, you told us that she said she felt okay. So you told her, and the judge cuts him off again. Please get to the question. And Tacopina says, I'm setting it up, Judge. He says, questions, not setting it up. We're not setting up a restaurant in here. Tacopina says, okay, I guess I'll forget that question. And at this point, I think Tacopina is doing this. He's not even fighting. Okay, he's just going to appeal this. He's going to appeal every time this happens. He's just going to appeal it. So he's like, all right, not even going to fight you on that. I wanted to ask a question about this very important topic, about the deposition and about Carroll feeling okay. And the judge won't let me even ask about it. I'll get to the next question, Judge, and we'll just take it up on appeal. So Tacopina asks another question. And he then says, sorry, that's argumentative. And he reads a definition from Black's Law Dictionary. And he says, you can't say that in my courtroom. Sorry. Tacopina says, okay, I guess I'll move on. So then you communicated with another lawyer, Miss Martin, is that true? Somebody called Noah Bialy, is that true? She said, yeah, I did. I was told that I needed a lawyer. And you also wrote, you said no more texts in your messages until further notice. You put that in your notes, right? Why'd you put that in there? He says, I'm not sure what I meant by that, but I was told someone would be coming to subpoena me for this case. Is that it? She says, is that it? Is that what you wanted to say? She says, yes, that's what I wanted to say. Now, I want to show you defense exhibit called ER. It says here, you told a friend that Miss Carroll intended to sue Trump for attacking her and that it's gone to another level. And that for Miss Carroll, this quest has become a lifestyle. Did you write that there? Yes, I did. What did you mean by that? She says, I know what I meant. Well, what did you mean? She said, I was being hyperbolic. She says, lifestyle is a word I just use, you know. I just say it a lot. Okay. So, E. Jean Carroll, you say this quest has become a lifestyle, right? She gets accolades. She gets litigation funded. There's people driving her around in cars, opening doors for her. There are people outside the courtrooms. We love you, Jean. We believe E. Jean Carroll. It's all this big party for these people. I was being hyperbolic. I just like that word. Tacopina says, I'm going to show you a text that you sent to your daughter in which you're venting. Says, I'm not sure I'm seeing the right one. You said here in this message, you said, Miss Carroll was loving the adulation. Did you say that? Yes. You wrote, in too deep. I'm just not there for it. Is that right? You're in too deep. I'm just not there for it. The judge says, hey, Joe, how much longer is this going to take? These are great questions. I hate them. Are you almost done yet? How much longer, Mr. Tacopina? He says, 10 minutes, Judge. I'll finish after lunch. He says, you're telling the jurors then. He says, all right, we're going to lunch now then. So we go to the lunch break and we go to lunch. And we fast forward. We're checking back in with Inner City Press reporting. Judge Kaplan is responding to his motion. He filed a motion to get the exhibits. And so I told you, go follow Inner City Press to get another layer of analysis here. He's filing motions for exhibits and the judge is going to hear them. Super great and cool. Tacopina says, he says, Miss Martin, when you were meeting with like-minded people around the 2016 election, you never brought up that your friend told you she had been attacked by Trump? You never told anybody about this in 2016? No. Thank you very much for your time. Nothing further. Redirect. So Roberta Kaplan comes back out, E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, trying to rehabilitate this witness. Ms. Martin, do you recall giving this testimony at your deposition, page 65, when you were venting to your daughter? Did you doubt E. Jean's story? She says, no, there's no reason to doubt it. Do you recall that? I do. Would you lie to stop the Trump train in this trial? Would you perjure yourself? No, of course not. Nothing further, Your Honor. Defense recross. Miss Martin, would you have said these things to Miss Carroll's face, that she lives a lifestyle and that she's doing this for adulation? Martin says, yes, I think I would. No further questions. Judge says, thank you, Miss Martin. You're excused. Plaintiff, next witness. Your Honor, we call Professor Ashley Humphreys of Northwestern. This is Ashley Humphreys, professor at Northwestern University, cultural sociology. If you want to learn a little bit more about her, you can go to her website, short bio from her. She is a sociologist who examines core topics in consumer behavior and marketing. We're going to be talking about social media. She's the author of a book called Enduring Principles of Social Media. She went to Northwestern, or is at Northwestern, at the School of Journalism. Since her work on legitimacy, she works on sustainability as a cultural discourse. Wow, this is a fancy, listen to this. Since her work on legitimacy, Humphreys has applied the institutional theory approach to study sustainability as a cultural discourse and a set of institutional practices. Does anybody know what the hell that means? I have no idea what that means. I have no idea. Since her work on legitimacy, she's applied institutional theory approach to study sustainability as a cultural discourse and a set of institutional practices. I have no idea what that says, what that means. I have no idea what that means. Literally, I have no idea. All right. I don't think she does either. All right. So anyways, who is testifying. And she wrote this book called Enduring Principles on social media enduring principles. Now, something happened here that is very important to note before we listen to her testimony. As we've long suspected, most of the people in this case are rabid anti-Trumpers, TDSers to the maximum degree. And Ashley Humphreys is no different. Oh, don't you hate when this surprise pops out of nowhere? Here is what we found when we did a nice little search. Some time ago, Business Professors of America.com. If you go to businessprofessorsofamerica.com, this is still up. They say, it's time for business leaders to speak out against the threat that Trump poses to our republic. Oh, no. Open letter and a call to action signed by 1,000+ business school professors from across America. Trump is a threat to our republic. Polarization in America is at record highs. And now we, prominent citizens representing a wide range of institutions, are speaking out about an existential threat to our republic. Veterans and generals and politicians and everybody have come out against the president, who denigrates science, incites violence, and all the things, okay? The hystericism on this is just nuts. But these, it's just like they love to sign letters, okay? That's basically the purpose for their existence. Others in society want to build businesses and build families and create relationships and be of service to their fellow man and women. And many Democrats, they just wake up looking for letters to sign. There was the 51 idiots who signed the intelligence so-called operation. Now there's 1,000 people. That's a lot of work to coordinate 1,000 people, to vet 1,000 people. Look at this. And they wrote this giant letter. Now, you can read the whole thing if you'd like. The point of this is all we've got to do is just go right here, and you can see, look whose name is right on the list, right there. Ashley Humphreys, Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University. You're kidding me! She doesn't like Trump? Whoa! And she's testifying in this trial? I'm sure she's fair and impartial. Let's go back over to the testimony and see how this unfolds. It is Ashley Humphreys from Northwestern. Oh, thanks for being here, Miss Humphreys. What's your PhD in? She says, oh, it's in cultural sociology and marketing. Now, Professor Humphreys, are you being paid for this testimony? She says, yeah. I got $500 to prepare and $850 for testimony. Now, that's per hour, right? She says, yes. Now, I want to go to the deck here, and they publish a deck on the screen, a slide deck. How many followers does Donald Trump have on Truth Social, since she's a social media expert? 4.7 million, she says. And how did you measure how his statements injured Miss Carroll? She says, great question. Let me explain. I'm an expert. Says, I considered a bunch of articles and I analyzed the threats. And how many articles did you consider here, Miss Humphreys? Well, of the 60 in the complaint by Miss Carroll against Trump, I chose 17. And remember, we have to talk about damages in this case. This is not a criminal trial where Trump goes to jail. This is about money and about media and about stopping him with a useful narrative that he's an attacker. So in the complaint, they listed 60 different stories that were damaging to E. Jean Carroll. And they've got to quantify this so that they can ask for money. Of the 60 stories that we listed, I looked at 17 of them. What websites did you look at? I looked at the Huffington Post, the Washington Post. I looked at ABC. And then I went through and I made a spreadsheet and I figured out how many people visit each by page views. Wow, very complicated. And why did you only consider Twitter and Truth Social? She says, well, Twitter is very transparent and I considered 13 tweets. And remember, not all of your followers see all of your tweets, and some are bots. And so I took those out, about 12% of the followers. And she says, Truth Social is basically similar to Twitter, but it hasn't been studied as much. And you don't have transparently, you don't have retweet and retruth information like you do on Twitter. So I figured about the same percentages. The statement, it was only on MSNBC and only on Fox. There were about 7 million impressions total. I calculated it all. It says, I also studied portrayals of Miss Carroll before the Trump stories. Portrayals. She was considered a sassy advice columnist and relationships. Then words like layer, etc. came in to be used. And so what I did to assess damages is I just calculated how much it would cost to run counter messages on cable. On cable TV, there are rates also for influencers and micro-influences. It's called reputational repair with corrective messaging. And so how much would that cost if E.G. needed to repair her relationship, her reputation? On TV, it would cost $133,000. What about on all of the platforms if you just added it all together? Total amount, $2.7 million. Thank you. Wow, that's a lot. No further questions. The judge says, perfect. We're going to take our 15-minute break, and we're back. Now they come back. Roberta says, hey, Your Honor, before we bring the jury back, I want to introduce an evidentiary issue. We want to bring in a paragraph from Trump's book. He wrote a book called Think Like a Billionaire. And judge says, well, what's the problem, Mr. Tacopina? Why can't we bring that in? He says, well, there was a co-author. He says, well, we'll deal with that later. Bring in the jury. All right, cross-examination now. Trump's lawyer is up. He says, okay, Professor Ashley, you were paid to study the impact of Trump's statements. Is that right? The judge says, can we avoid the obvious here? Again, we don't get any of that for the plaintiff. Can we avoid the obvious? Trump's lawyer says, is there harm from false accusations of attacks? Roberta, objection. Judge sustains it. Next question. Did you study Ms. Carroll's appearances on podcasts? No. Is it fair to say that those on True Social mostly support Trump? She says, yeah, that's likely true. And you didn't consider positive statements about Ms. Carroll? She says, I saw them, but they didn't require correction. Did you consider Ms. Carroll's book and the excerpt in The Cut? Objection, asked and answered. Judge says, yep, sustained, move on. So Brandt sits back down. Okay, guess I don't have any other questions. No further questions, and sits down. Now, we get another witness. This one is called Roberta Myers. The judge says to the jurors, hey, we may go past 4:30. Any problem, raise your hands. Nope, nobody raises their hands. They call the next witness. Her name is Roberta Myers. She is a former Elle editor. And I did not have a photo of her because I don't think she was up yet before we started the show. But it looks like she's a Trump columnist. And I think this is what she looks like. Yes, former editor-in-chief of the magazine. Here is a photograph. Trump, this is Roberta Myers, former editor-in-chief of Elle magazine. So we'll get her added to the mind map here very shortly. But that is who is up on the stand. Miss Roberta, when were you an editor? She says, back from 1993 to 1995. I also worked for NBC and 17 at the time. And how did you come to know Miss Carroll? We worked together. Have you ever met the defendant, Donald Trump? Yeah, I was on an episode of The Apprentice. Did you support Donald Trump for president in 2016 or 2020? No, I'm a Democrat. No further questions. Trump's lawyer comes up. Miss Roberta, how did you leave Elle? Not voluntarily. That's it. No redirect. The judge says, okay, well, I'm assuming there's no more witnesses. Let me see counsel at sidebar then. Counsel comes up. Judge returns and says, I am ruling, quote, in the event Mr. Trump, whatever reason, testifies in this case, could he get back from the UK by Monday before closing arguments? He seemed to say he might. We don't know. The jury comes back in. Any other evidence by the plaintiff? Roberta Kaplan says, yes, Your Honor, we have a stipulation. It says that plaintiff E. Jean Carroll produced diaries, including entries that she was distraught by political developments, a death, and that she hit her back. So that means this is a written document that is evidence that the jury can see that is agreed upon by the defense and the plaintiff. E. Jean Carroll produced diaries. She was distraught by political developments, a death, and she hit her back. And with that, Your Honor, E. Jean Carroll rests. They're done. The judge says, okay, well, we will almost certainly reconvene Monday at 10, but we need contact information on how to let you know if things change. Says, you each call in after 10 p.m. on Sunday. He's explaining this to the jury. Call in until you hear different. You're back here at 10 a.m. on Monday. But if you call in on Sunday night and it says you're not needed, don't come in. Understand? Anybody not? Great. You're done. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Now, lawyers, do we have any motions here? And Tacopina says, yeah, Your Honor, we move for a judgment as a matter of law. This is like a motion for a judgment of acquittal, right? After the plaintiff or the prosecutor rests, you just say, oh, they haven't presented any evidence. They haven't presented anything. I don't even have to show a defense because their case was so crap. So we move for a judgment as a matter of law. Judge says, denied, obviously. And he says, so we rest our case. So Mr. Trump, says the judge, waives his right to testify. Tacopina says he does. Judge says, how recently have you spoken to him, by the way? He says, a few minutes before I came into court this morning. The judge says, well, I'm committed to allowing parties to make their case. I will allow Mr. Trump up till 10 p.m. Sunday to make a motion to testify. I'm not saying I'll grant it, but I'll consider it and we'll see what happens. 10 p.m. Sunday, that's it. Tacopina says I could do 10 a.m. Sunday. He says, let's do 5 p.m. Sunday. There have been news reports out there in the British Isles attributed to Mr. Trump about his possible testifying here, which we played earlier. So I've taken precautions. Now, if Trump changes his mind, if he does want to come back in and testify, have him file a motion by Sunday. And just for those of you joining us, this is what Trump said recently.
I have to leave Ireland and I have to leave Scotland, where I have great properties. I have to leave early. I don't have to, but I choose to.
Will you attend the trial, Mr.
I'll
President?
probably attend. It's a disgrace that it's allowed to happen. It's called false accusations against a rich guy, or in my case, against a famous, rich, and political person that's leading the polls by 40 points. And I have to go back for a woman that made a false accusation about me, and I have a judge who's extremely hostile. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to confront this one. This woman is a disgrace, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen in our country. That's totally false. It was fake. She's a fake. She wrote in a book she's a Democrat. We have a rough judge. We have a judge that doesn't like me much, appointed by Bill Clinton. And he's a guy that doesn't like me much. He's, I guess, not allowing the coat that they wanted to put into evidence. Once we said, yes, put it into evidence, they said, oh, we don't want to do that. It's a disgrace, but I have to do it. That's part of life.
Part of life, indeed. So Trump is afforded the opportunity to testify if he so chooses. The judge has said taken precautions on this. So how much time do you expect you need for closing arguments? Tacopina, Trump's lawyer, says, I think about 2 hours for each side. E. Jean's lawyer says, we need 2 hours and 45 minutes. And so the judge says, okay, so 2 hours then? She says, I'm negotiating against myself, but 2.5 would be okay. The judge says, let me get out my slide rule. I don't want to show my age or anything. So Tacopina says, how about this, Your Honor? Plaintiff can go from 10 to noon. The defense can go from 1 to 3:30. Says that would work unless we have a media event outside. They start laughing. Now, Ed Sheeran's gone. Apparently, he had a trial right around the corner. He won. Judge Kaplan says, who won that trial? Tacopina says, Ed Sheeran. He says, all right, well, as to the media request, if the email addresses are taken out, we've got no problem. Says, I want the media to understand. Either do I, as long as email's out, I mean addresses, but my whole staff is here, so work it out. Tacopina says, okay, well, what about the charging conference, Your Honor? When are we doing that? He says, I am to know if I'm calling off the jury at 10 a.m. Monday. Well, why would you? Well, if there's a motion made, you say you don't want, and I believe in your hearts of hearts you don't, but he said, so Tacopina says, okay, so we'll do the draft at 8 a.m. on Monday. We come in at 9 a.m. and then the jury will be here. We'll do closings at 10 and then with the plaintiff, and then we'll be back with the defense at 1:30. Judge says, okay, we're done. Have a good weekend. And the jury is already gone. Now the attorneys leave. And that is it on the day.